Good morning. My name is Melissa Martin, and I serve our congregation as Member Services Coordinator. I am glad to welcome you to this celebration of the lives of two of our most beloved members, Carolyn and Bill Grace. Following the service, we want to invite you to join us in sharing your stories and reflections about Bill and Carolyn. I know you'll have a lot of those stories at the memorial reception with seating both inside and outside. You can get some food and beverage, and you'll find seating both outside on our tables on our lawns and inside our fellowship hall. There is no way for us to capture all that Carolyn and Bill were for this congregation or in the world. Our former minister, Jane Zepka, observed that if there was going to be a UUCR state funeral, this would be it. Our former minister, Tim Kutzmark, said, "Carolyn and Bill's deaths certainly marked the end of an era. They truly were the first couple. Sunday morning coffee prep will never be the same. They were such warm, devoted, and generous people." I want to begin our service with these words, which Bill had saved from a worship service held at UCR many years ago. "I often think that people we have loved and who have loved us not only make us more human, but they become part of us, and we carry them around all the time, whether we see them or not. And in some way, we are the sum total of those who have loved us and those we have given ourselves to." Bill and Carolyn were two such people. Let us join now in celebrating them as two of Bill's grandchildren light our chalice and memorial candles, one for Bill, one for Carolyn, and one for this community they loved so much. Please rise in body or spirit to join us. Oh, excuse me, I apologize, I jumped the gun. We're going to say our chalice lighting words, which are in your order of service. And Josh and Sarah will light the candle for us. So, in the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, we gather this day. May the flame we now kindle be to us a symbol of the holiness we seek. And now, please rise in body or spirit to join in singing one of Bill and Carolyn's favorite hymns, "Morning Has Broken." The words are in your order of service, and if you're joining us on social media, they will appear in the chat.
Thank you, and please be seated. I'm pleased to welcome one of Bill's daughters, Ruth Goslin, to share a very meaningful poem.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. So this was a poem that my parents read to each other every morning from the UU hymnal. It's appropriate for funerals, it's appropriate for weddings, And indeed, it was read at our son and his new bride's wedding just in December. We also read it when we buried Bill's ashes commingled with my mom's a few weeks ago. So, and it goes like this. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow, a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Bill and Carolyn's granddaughter, Sarah Kelly, also has a remembrance of her beloved grandparents. Sarah.
We are here today to honor the memory of two people we all loved and admired dearly. Some of us knew Bill and Carolyn from church, from RCS, from around town, or from one of the many other organizations they were involved in over the years. But we are all here because our lives were touched by them in some unique way. My name is Sarah, and I am lucky enough to be Bill and Carolyn's oldest grandchild. Today, I would like to speak to you about what it was like to be their granddaughter. My entire childhood, I had the privilege of living 2 doors down from my grandparents. At the corner of Charles and Haverhill Streets sits 3 sturdy houses built by my great-grandfather. We call this little slice of paradise the family compound. My grandparents' house sits less than a football field away from my childhood home, and so naturally, I spent a lot of time there growing up. Some of my most treasured childhood memories center around my relationship with my grandparents. I will never forget playing ping pong in the basement, Papa recording our heights on the bedroom door frame, or summer afternoons spent on the porch playing board games or just talking about life. Sometimes my parents would go away on business or vacation, and my brother Josh and I would get to spend a few glorious days eating Grammy's homemade spaghetti sauce, or my favorite, hot dogs on buttered toasted buns. We would discuss important topics like what mom and dad were likely eating for dinner that night, and Papa would tell us stories about his time in the Navy or their latest trip to England. During these stays, there was always an outing or two, usually to Boston to visit the aquarium, one of the museums, or a musical performance of some kind. For a long time, Grammy and Papa would visit the UK almost every year. They loved London and visiting their good friends, Audrey and Frank Garrity. Papa seemed to know everything about the history of the British monarchy, and he spoke about the royal family as if he knew them personally. He referred to the Queen as if she was an old friend of his and Grammy's. He was so convincing that as a young girl, I just assumed my grandparents were meeting the Queen for tea at Buckingham Palace whenever they visited London. Looking back, I think Papa must have made a joke one time about meeting the Queen, and young me took it literally. Grammy was the kindest person I've ever met. She had something positive to say in just about every situation and never uttered a bad word about anyone. When I was a little girl, we would spend summer afternoons digging up carrots and zucchinis in her garden. At Christmas time, she would bake the most delicious frosted fruit bread and bring it to us on Christmas morning, and my brother and I would excitedly show them what we got from Santa. On Grammy's last day, I was 3 months pregnant with my daughter, Chloe. We were planning on finding out the gender, but didn't yet know that she was a girl. One of the last things Grammy said to me was, "Sarah, Connor is so beautiful, and your daughter is going to be so beautiful too." I don't know how she knew it. It could have been a lucky guess, maybe wishful thinking for a great-granddaughter, who knows. I like to think that she and Chloe somehow met each other in passing. Chloe on the way into this life, and Carolyn on the way out. Either way, every time I see Chloe's big cheeky smile, I am forever reminded of my Grammy Carolyn. After Grammy died, Papa was devastated, but what brought him a little bit of joy each week was spending time with my 2-year-old son, Connor. Connor and Papa quickly developed a special bond. Every Monday, they would sit in the bay window and watch the world go by, pointing out various trucks as they passed down Haverhill Street. One of my favorite memories of them together was on Papa's 89th birthday. Singers from UUCR and RCS had just been by to perform a special concert for him on the lawn. Afterwards, we had a family lunch at my parents' house. One of Papa's friends had stopped by earlier with a box of munchkins, the kind that holds like 25 or whatever the maximum is. Papa and Connor were sitting next to each other at the end of the table, having a grand old time, chatting and snacking on munchkins. To be honest, I was just happy that Connor was occupied, and I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on, until I looked over and realized that all of the munchkins, all 25 of them, were gone. Papa and Connor had tag-teamed the entire box, and were laughing about it. Just two friends chatting over some snacks, despite the 87-year age gap between them. Life on the former family compound will never be the same without them around, but I feel so blessed to have had Bill and Carolyn and Grace as my grandparents. I feel even more fortunate that Papa got to meet Chloe and that both of them got to spend time with Connor. I will carry them in my heart forever, and someday I will tell the children all about their great-grandparents who loved them so much. I hope that I can honor their memory by living my life in a way that they would be proud of. Sometimes when I'm having a hard day, I stop and think about how they would have handled the situation or what advice they would have given. In this way, they are still here with me and always will be.
To chase
I want to just add this note, which is that almost all the music that you are hearing in this service is music that was significant for Bill or Carolyn. And Bill made notes, a lot of notes for us. And so we are blessed to be able to offer these pieces with much gratitude to Mary and Trevor and to our wonderful choir. Thank you. Well, some things just have a way of working out, even if you don't know how they will end. 62 years of marriage. Yes, some things have a way of working out, and Bill and Carolyn Grace's love affair with each other and with life seems like that. Bill and Carolyn's deep devotion to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Reading, to their family, to making this world a stronger, better, more loving place, began, of course, with their own individual beginnings.
The elements that you hear in this story, which Deb and I are going to share in two voices representing Bill and Carolyn, are drawn from the many anecdotes told about them and some from their own words. So journey with us as we share some of the story of their remarkable yet ordinary lives, both individually and together. As Bill said, life is a series of discrete events, little vignettes, some alone, and some strung together like a strand of pearls, the circle of life.
Bill Grace was born in 1932, and he would have turned 90 this November 1st. In a talk he was preparing for the UU Church of Reading's Liberal Ladies, he noted that his birth journey started as his Uncle Dave's Model A Ford Roadster made its way up Parker Hill Avenue in Roxbury to Boston Lying In Hospital. It was Halloween, and he emerged into the world following the celebrations of firecrackers and mischief that marked the spooky holiday. He lived with his parents and his two sisters, Virginia and Jessie, in Somerville, just off Davis Square, with other members of the immediate family living nearby, and attended public schools in Somerville. Bill remembered that he loved his geography teacher at the Highland School and enjoyed visiting other countries on the map that was in his classroom. And while he was at school, World War II was raging, and there was an expectation that the boys in elementary and junior high school would, in time, join their fathers and uncles in uniform. It was only years later that he learned that Carolyn also lived near Davis Square and had gone to Highland School as a kindergartner, right around the same time that Bill was out there clapping those erasers.
Carolyn Grace wanted to be a dental hygienist. Her intention was to attend the Forsyth School, part of the same Massachusetts College of Pharmacy that Bill went to. But myasthenia gravis changed all that. The disease, which causes muscle weakness, drooping eyelids, and speech impairment, shortness of breath, and more, it was something that Carolyn needed to reckon with all her life, and her illness meant that higher education was not in the cards for her. She was hospitalized at Mass General. She nearly died, but she fooled fate and survived to age 84. She became a secretary And it was in that business world where a blind date changed everything.
Bill had a job working at a local drugstore while in high school. There, he learned about pharmacy techniques and became interested in the health sciences. He graduated from high school in June 1950. He recalled being restless, a little anxious about the future, and he went on to write, "I suspect my angst was reflecting the general mood in the country that summer. It was a challenging time in the United States. Senator Joseph McCarthy had begun his communist witch hunt. The Cold War was escalating. War clouds were gathering in the Far East. And the breaking point, as Bill noted, was reached on June 25th when North Korea breached the 38th parallel and invaded South Korea. President Truman ordered troops into the area, and as Bill said, rather than wait for the Army to catch me, I joined the Navy." Bill spent the next 5 years in uniform, where he was accepted to the Hospital Corps School and became a medic. He was ordered to the USS Prairie, a destroyer in the Pacific. After a month at sea, he arrived in Sasebo, Japan. Eventually, the USS Prairie rotated back to San Diego. And during that time, he remembered hearing the Patti Page song, "You Belong to Me."
And then there was that chance meeting with Carolyn. He recalled a blind date that his friend arranged with her, and he was smitten. Shortly thereafter, wondering if or when he would see her again, he recalls riding on a streetcar and looking out the window, and there she was. It was kind of like that song from the musical South Pacific about the stranger you see across a crowded room. And interestingly, their next date was going to see that film.
This relationship was meant to be. It was truly one that grew out of deep love and respect. In Bill's notes, he wrote, "Miss Carolyn / courtship / babies / new house / new job." It was a time of post-war growth with a lot going on. Upon leaving military service, Bill began studies at the Mass College of Pharmacy. He was involved with many activities, including, yes, performing in a production of South Pacific and serving tea and social time biscuits to his professors and their guests. No doubt this prepared him for his coffee-making responsibilities at UUCR years later. He reflected on that time. Any professional success I enjoyed was a combination of factors, beginning with being an older, mature student, a solid education at MCP, and a little luck landing that first big job. He worked for Gillette and conducted basic chemical research, developing products, working in medical evaluation, and other regulatory roles. And his name is on several US and international patents.
And so Bill and Carolyn were married, and the family grew. There were children, Ruth, Martha, and Andrew, and setting down roots in the community of Reading. Carolyn had to reckon with her myasthenia gravis after the birth of each of her children, relying not only on Bill, but on his parents to help care for them until she regained her strength. The family became members of the Old South United Methodist Church, and of course, part of that connection was singing in the choir, with Carolyn lending her support to gardening and teaching. In the late 1960s, Bill and Carolyn were becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the theology of the church, and they were questioning the direction of its religious education program. Bill told me he was mowing the church lawn one day, a meditative task for him, and he had an epiphany right there in the grass. And he tried to convince me that to this day, the grass still will not grow there, but he couldn't quite keep a straight face while he was telling me that. He hesitated to shout about this news at home, but Carolyn came to him shortly after that, saying she too had come to the conclusion that that church and its theology no longer fit them. The year was 1969, and there was, as it turns out, an advertisement in the back pages of the Reading Chronicle describing the religious education program of another church that Carolyn and Bill had never heard of, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Reading. Carolyn thought they should give it a try, so they made the short trip up Woburn Street from the Methodist Church to the stone building at number 239, and they never looked back.
When Hello, everyone. I'm Robin Matsky, and currently I am part of the governing board, the clerk of the church, but mostly I am honored to share a few thoughts and memories with you all. Like many folks in this congregation, Bill was quite literally one of the first people I met here at UUCR. As my older daughter recently said, he was the welcoming committee. He and Carolyn had an impact on our lives ever since. That shouldn't come as a surprise to most of you. Bill and Carolyn lived out their commitment to our community in a way that I aspire to. They welcomed all, and especially they made sure that the children and youth knew they were as integral as anyone else. Our family wasn't around for the Grace holiday cards, but Bill welcomed my younger daughter, as he did so many others, into the kitchen and taught them how to run the goldfish counter. My daughter even scolded me that I wasn't keeping the counter clean like Bill did. And did I ever hear a story of when Bill and Carolyn took a weekend training for the About Your Sexuality, or AYS class, that they agreed to teach to the UUCR youth at the time? Bill and Carolyn would always take the time to chat, speak up, and connect with everyone in the community. I remember once I was chatting with the two of them after a service and wondering if something in the service wasn't a bit risque, and having Carolyn tell me that if people couldn't handle it, that was their problem. Or when Bill attended religious education training, even though his own participation was waning, so he could pass on his knowledge to us, including that AYS story. But I want to leave you with a treasured memory that illustrates one of the wonderful and serendipitous ways that I connected with Bill specifically. While chatting with him during coffee hour, I discovered that Bill used to usher for the Boston Symphony Orchestra. The BSO is dear to my heart. My husband and I were longtime subscribers. Once I learned he was a volunteer, we realized our paths must have crossed. He may have taken our tickets or even helped us find our seats. From then on, Bill and I would talk about Symphony Hall, all the esoteric instruments they had on display, and how much we just loved being in that building. When I get to return to Symphony Hall and listen to the BSO once more, I'm going to carry Bill in my heart. May your connections with Bill and Carolyn bring you as much joy as you remember the ways you lived in community with them. And thank you.
Hi, folks. I have a couple of stories to share with you, one from Bill and one from Carolyn, and they relate to leadership. Carolyn and Bill were so committed to this congregation from the very beginning of their time at UUCR and right up until their final days on earth. Neither of them was shy about sharing their opinions, though always kind and encouraging. Pitching in is just what they expected of themselves and of us. First, Bill's essay from November 15th, 1992, titled, "Why Do We Volunteer?" Quote, "Carolyn and I came to this church nearly 25 years ago. We had just about given up on organized religion after lifetimes of church-going, and being at least nominally practicing Christians, I had even been saved. Growing doubt and disillusionment ended in the profound realization that our religion made no sense to us anymore, and it was time to move on. Carolyn searched for a church that offered something more for her and the children. She found it at the corner of Woburn and Summer and made the move. But I was suspicious of a church that I knew nothing about, except that it closed for the summer. So I tarried a while at the old shop until I couldn't stand it any longer, and then joined the rest of the family. We were welcomed by a group of warm, compassionate, talented, creative, and thinking individuals, committed to celebrating life while searching for the answers to the big questions, and who were open to the opinions and ideas of a newcomer. We started to experience the wonderful feeling of belonging, enjoying, and becoming. I hadn't been in the church for more than a few weeks when the then minister, John Skyrick, visited me in my home and asked if I would be willing to help out a little around the church, perhaps some leadership. I thought it over for a few seconds and tentatively said, sure. Before a week had passed, I was on the board, president of the council, and co-chair of the fair. I also quickly found where the brooms, the choir loft, and the Sunday school were. One of the most important things I have learned over these past years is that this place, this religion, this movement does make sense and does indeed offer more, and it is worth working for. We are committed to do what we can to ensure that it survives, flourishes, and continues to be a place of inspiration, renewal, and fulfillment. Signed, W.R.G. This next is a letter from Carolyn that she wrote on September 30th, 2008. She definitely expects some action from the board regarding the work she's been doing for the last 13 years. To the UUCR Governing Board. 13 years ago, our church began a program to update the church grounds and improve our image on the corner of Summer and Woburn. This enhancement has been pleasing to all who enter our doors and to our neighbors, too. Over these years, I have been the coordinator, or chief groundhog, of that effort. I am no longer able to fill this position. I need to retire. Because our bylaws state that the governing board shall have the responsibility for the proper care and management of all church property, I submit this letter to you. My hope is that a new grounds committee will be formed and the work I begun 13 years ago will continue. Sincerely, Carolyn Grace. So I'm thinking that Bill and Carolyn are offering a lot of us, maybe all of us, a gentle suggestion. When an opportunity, I'm hearing you snickering out there, when an opportunity presents itself, don't agonize over it. Just say yes. That's what they did, and they set such a remarkable example for all of us and for our kids. Our children are now 40 and 36 years old, and they remember the Christmas cards from Bill and Carolyn and the notes at coming of age time and Bill's UUCR history lessons. All those goldfish, apple juice, and cups of cocoa at coffee hour. Carolyn and Bill cared so much about this church. They expect us to carry on. We will set an example for each other and for our children. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you. Always with a notebook.
Several years ago, Carolyn's daughter, Ruth, asked me to start spending some time visiting her mother. Carolyn was about 80 years old then, and her health was becoming frail. Ruth wanted her mom to have a woman to talk to. But each time I went, Carolyn asked Bill if he wanted to join us for tea. I finally realized that she didn't want him to be left out. So after some months of this, they cheerfully began to refer to me as their third daughter. And though I have a number of years on Ruth and Martha, I naturally felt so honored to be thought of that way. Having known Bill and Carolyn at church for more than 40 years, it was natural for such precious bonds of kinship to be felt. And we talk about our church family all the time, don't we? Well, it's true. In time, it got more difficult for Carolyn to get to church with her walker, and she stopped coming on Sundays. I continued to visit, and every time she shared how much she missed this sanctuary, this church, and everyone in it. Finally, she decided that whatever it took, she was going to get here. Ruth would help her through the back parking lot entrance that now has the automatic handicapped access doors that bear her name. And every week, Carolyn and I sat together up front, closest to the choir, because both of our husbands were singing in the choir. One such Sunday, Ron sang a solo, and Carolyn turned to me with her eyes sparkling like a schoolgirl's. She whispered, "When you hear your husband sing, don't you just fall in love with him all over again?" And there was a pause, and her eyes gleamed even more brightly as she said, "That happened to me every time. When Bill sang a solo, I fell in love with him all over again." Well, Carolyn was all about love. Her smile was love. Her presence was love. That day in church, I sensed a quiet passion and steadfast fire in her love. Carolyn and Bill shared the depth of that love in their long marriage and in their much-beloved extended family and their church family. After Carolyn died, I continued to visit Bill on a weekly basis, and he loved to tell his stories. Before you knew it, 2 hours went by. He loved looking back on his life, and in his wisdom, he told me that he was choosing only the happy stories to review. Anyone here today who got to sit with Bill in his sunny kitchen knows he had a gift for telling those stories. I would like to share with my reflection today 2 of my favorite Bill stories that go back to his childhood in Somerville. The young Bill was about 10 years old during World War II when butter was rationed. One day, an elderly neighbor asked him to take her ration coupon to the grocery store and pick up her butter, which he did. Word of this act of kindness got around fast. Pretty soon, Bill was doing butter runs all over the neighborhood, one ration coupon at a time, because that was the rule. Bill was very proud of keeping his neighbors in butter every week. In another story, Bill and a young friend became entrepreneurs, this time for a bit of profit. They had plastic molds you could fill with liquid plaster. One mold was an animal, one was the Virgin Mary, and the third one he couldn't remember. The boys made plaster samples, painted them, and went door to door in the neighborhood, taking orders. Then they delivered what they sold. Bill laughed at the memory that in Somerville, the Virgin Mary was the top seller. Well, what a treat it was for me to be ferried back in time to when young Bill got his start in community service and dreamed up a business to meet the needs of the local spirituality market. The common thread for me in these stories is Bill's authentic love for all kinds of people. He epitomized kindness as a lifestyle, as did Carolyn. How blessed we are that Bill and Carolyn chose us and made UUCR their spiritual home. I will miss them, and I will always feel grateful to be their honorary third daughter.
Thank you so much, Laura and Lorraine and Robin. Well, tempting as it might be to say, the rest is history, there was much more. Bill passionately served the Boston Symphony Orchestra, as you've heard, in the archive department and gave tours after he retired from Gillette of Symphony Hall. In 2010, he received the Hesse Sargent Spirit of Volunteer Award in recognition of his generous support of the BSO. And he was equally passionate about his singing in the UUCR choir and with the Reading Community Singers.
Ruth, Martha, and Andrew grew up, went off on their own, and brought over time partners into the family, Mike, Rick, and Patricia. Over time, they had their own children, Sarah, Joshua, Alexander, Jonathan, and Keith, and their partners, and later great-grandchildren, Connor and Chloe, and they were Bill and Carolyn's delight. Bill and Carolyn lived their commitment to religious education by being trained in About Your Sexuality, which is the precursor to Our Whole Lives. They mortified their children, some of whom were in their sex ed classes, with the information they wanted to convey. And they became teachers for religious education. And when receiving orientation for their role as teachers, they took seriously that they were making a lifelong commitment to the children and the youth of this church. When Christmas rolled around, part of that commitment was sitting down and writing Christmas cards to each child in the RE program, which during the height of the baby boom was nearly 200. There was the sense that Carolyn and Bill were everywhere. Suzanne Sullivan recalls that it was Carolyn who first convinced her to sew for the Kris Kringle Fair, and think about what a difference that connection has made. Many others talked about Carolyn's unending care for our grounds. And the wayside pulpit sign, that was Bill's territory. No matter the weather, he was out there changing the quotation to make sure that people knew the values of this congregation as they drove by.
Bill and Carolyn's connection to children and youth included coming-of-age mentoring, and of course, and as you've heard, Bill handing out those cups of goldfish crackers and apple juice or lemonade at each social hour. By the way, look for the goldfish and the donuts that he loved so much at the reception. And they wrote personal notes to every youth who went through the Coming of Age program. They lavished their love on those kids from this church for generations. Bill said, being a parent, while rewarding, was not always easy, but being a grandparent is really a piece of cake. And in so many ways, the kids of UUCR were their grandchildren too. And they really were grandparents for generations of kids. Bill and Carolyn were best friends, in love and living happily in their dream house on Haverhill Street. But they did travel, as you've heard, to Europe, to other parts of the United States, always a delight. And their commitment to our UU faith and to churches went with them. David Adamson shared this story. A former intern in our church was minister of a congregation in California. That church built a new patio and was planning a dedication ceremony after the service. During the service, the minister was fretting about getting the chairs rearranged from the sanctuary to the new patio between the service and the dedication ceremony, and she thought, we need somebody like Bill Grace to help with that. Meanwhile, Bill and Carolyn were on vacation across the United States, and they decided to stop at our intern's church for Sunday worship. Then, after the service, the minister was astonished to see Bill out there rearranging the chairs in California. And a ministerial colleague of mine, I believe, was there, and what she said was, the expression was, we've been Bill Graced.
Time and health flew. Carolyn and Bill treasured knowing that their grands and their great-grands lived nearby so they could remain a closely knit family. Bill said, we love and respect all our kids and our grandkids unconditionally and know that their love and respect is returned. They had serious talks about aging, the ones that provided guidance for the latter part of their lives. Carolyn's health deteriorated more rapidly than Bill's, and after a short illness, she died peacefully on March 6, 2021. Shortly thereafter, Bill wrote a note. Carolyn dies, and my future is... He reflected that their children and friends were terrific during this time, but he wrote, the future is unknown. After pandemic delays, a celebration of Carolyn's life was held on June 11th of that year. Her imprint on this congregation and on all that blooms on these grounds is ever present.
Even as his health continued to decline and he became less physically present on the grounds of this church, Bill's engagement was keen. He regaled friends with stories when they came to call. He wanted to manage things even to the end. When I visited him in the hospital during the last week of his life, he said, it's May 1st. Maybe this is a good day to die. But then he wanted to see how Ruth and Martha had arranged the house to accommodate a hospital bed. And he got excited at the thought of visiting with some of the friends he hadn't seen in months, in person even. So he decided he'd stick around for a few more days. He made it home, and thanks to the care of his children, grandchildren, and extended family, he had many visitors. The voices of the choir, the stories of friends, a few bites of the donuts he used to sneak into the church away from Carolyn's eye, a last snuggle with beautiful Connor. And then, surrounded by love, he slipped away into the mysteries of death on May 4th. His remains, as you have heard, were interred on May 14th, with his ashes commingled with Carolyn's, as was their request. These two very good people who brought so much to this world now rest from their labors. So friends, let us rise now in body or spirit and celebrate all that they are, all that they were, with joy. Our hymn is For All the Saints, and the words are printed in your order of service and will appear in the chat for those joining online.
Our reading is from The Gardener by Rabindranath Tagore. Peace, my heart, let the time for the parting be sweet. Let it not be a death, but completeness. Let love melt into memory and pain into songs. Let the flight through the sky end in the folding of the wings over the nest. Let the last touch of your hands be gentle, like the flower of the night. Stand still, O beautiful end, for a moment, and say your last words in silence. I bow to you and hold up my lamp to light you on your way.
Let us join now in prayer and meditation. Dear ones, those who come to celebrate, to remember, and to mourn, let us be together as we pause to reflect in gratitude for the lives of Carolyn and Bill Grace. Let us give thanks for all which is both whole and broken now, for the love, the beauty, the undying belief in this community and the wider world, which Bill and Carolyn embraced and lived every day. As they encouraged each other and us to look to this day, they embodied the faith that is now ours to nurture and sustain. Let us also grasp and gently hold the broken places in our hearts and in our lives as we mourn their loss and departure from the bonds of this struggling blue marble that we call home. Through the brokenness, we reach to one another to hold their memories, their good works in the world, and the promise we now carry on in the days to come. In their spirit, let us hold fast to one another now. In their honor, we affirm their love of us, this church, our community, and their undying optimistic belief that there are beauties in the world yet to be revealed if we would only act to make them so. So let us pause now in the silence to hold their love, their legacy, and their enduring commitment to us all.
Our closing words are the poem In Blackwater Wood by Mary Oliver. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light and are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds, and every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this: the fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes, to let it go. To let it go. And so please rise in body or spirit to sing another of Bill and Carolyn's favorite hymns, Amazing Grace. And the lyrics are in your order of service and in the chat online.
Friends, our service of celebration is about to end, but the memories that we hold will endure. A quote that Carolyn saved says it best: "May we never forget that life keeps on pulsing on. The stars still shine. The sun rises again. New buds burst forth, and love still presses on." Let me make a note that when the service ends, the family will be exiting through those doors and will be outside on the ramp to greet you. So if you head that way, you'll be able to say hello to them and then come inside for refreshments. I invite you now to please join in our chalice extinguishing words, which are printed in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts. Our closing words: go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return to no one evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings, as Bill and Carolyn have done. Amen.